Hello everyone. Today we're going to do not 5, not 10, 20 simple flowers everybody can do. A few things you want to have. I'm having probably 2 or 3 brush. Synthetic, it's easy to control your pigment. And these are cheap Jackson Studio Series 505. I bought them probably 7-8 years ago. But they're perfectly fine. They work very well and does the job very well. I'm going to use 3 brushes. If needed, I'll use a small rigger or a small brush. And I always usually use a 6B pencil. The one I'm having is TK9400 Faber-Castell. Super handy, mechanical clutch pencil, works very well and doesn't leave much mark. So if you're planning on doing a big painting and other thing, it's a handy pencil to have. Also, for the video, I'm going to press a little more so that it's visible on the video, or else usually I'm doing a very light sketch so that we can have different colors. Also on my right, I have a tube of lemon yellow. I generally don't use it, but maybe for the flowers, I see a few daffodils and gerbera. We might use some lemon yellow. I've got 2 pots of clean water, a little bit of sponge to soak up excess liquid, and I always have a roll of tissue just in case. My palette is a John Pike palette. There's lots of colors. I'm going to put in an image of what the colors are. These are, I hardly use all the colors. There's only a few colors I use over and over again. Just because I have so many wells, I tend to have different colors. But I will put in the notes and what the colors are in the description. Okay, and the images, at the moment you can't see it, but it'll be on the video. I'm trying to attempt 20 flowers, easy flowers, with less details. These are excellent for greeting cards, wedding gifts, or any of the cute little drawings you want to do. All right, let's start with simple rose. So I don't know whether you can see it, I've just roughly split 5 by 4 so that it can fit nice and tight. So there's a rose. I'm going to do a simple shape and a couple of leaves. That's it. So these are image reference you can see. Then there's a marigold. Just 2 shapes. There's one orange and there's one yellow. It has a leaf. Then there is the hibiscus. I'm not paying too much attention on the details. There's a stigma, or maybe it's a style. Maybe one of you guys can correct me. And that. And I found this picture on Pinterest. I'm not really sure who owns this. Don't get mad if I don't give you any credit. I just don't know who owns that photo. And this one is a pansy, a little bit of yellow, and plumerium, a little bit of yellow, and let's see, a little bit of tulip. They're obviously bell-shaped. Tulips are very popular artist material. A lot of people paint them, including me. And again, keep in mind, these are not detailed sketches. These are simple sketches we're trying to demonstrate. And a little bit of jasmine. This is more of a star shape. I'll do one more. and a couple of buds. Few leaves, and then there is a dahlia. So there is stars. There's stars. That was my wife asking if chicken is cooked. Yes, it is. As I said, if I was drawing on my own, I wouldn't put too many details, but just for the benefit of the audience, I'm putting in a lot more detail. Sunflower. I'm gonna fill in a few more details in the I'm gonna fill in a few more details as and when it goes. And then there's a lotus, very similar to rose but cleaner. Then a stalk, a lily, I'm thinking about this might be roughly, we're talking about 2 to 3 minutes per flower. We're not going to go more than that. This dahlia, so I'm just doing a sketch. A couple of orchids. I think this is a common moth orchid. We have Rajnigandha. You can make out I'm not much of a, I don't know much about flowers, but they are a good subject, and it's a good starting point for people to use. And there is Zinnia or Zania. So I'm not going to add too many details. I'm going to try to get those petal control in the when I'm painting. Then there is Carnation. Maybe a couple of bulbs. And there's a lavender. I'm not sure, is it called a bushel of lavender or is it a bunch of lavender? I'm going to just do. Then there is a little bit of rosemary flowers, really small, delicate, and I might be slightly off on the colors. I'm not trying to do a good color representation, but what I'm trying to show is what you can do. This one is a gerbera. There's a lot of common petals. I'm going to fill in those details. And the last one is a daffodil. Well, that's a lot of flowers, but we will try to get a go with it. The first thing is rose. I'm using, as you see, my palette is a little messy. Why don't I just clear up a place, a little bit of space. That. And a lot of these flowers I'm going to go revisit because usually I use a dryer to dry the paint, but since there is no dryer, because my kids are sleeping, I'm going to use similar colors on all the flowers, so think of watercolor painting as in 3 layers. So that's the lower tone, then we're going to do a middle tone, and then we're going to do a highlight. I'm going to try to finish all the paintings in just 3 layers. So I'm going to come back with slightly darker color. It's still a little wet. I'm going to let it dry a little more. But meanwhile, why don't I go to the next. So this one is a marigold. So obviously the first layer, the second one is a little orangish. Yeah. And there's a little bit of green. Leaves. I would let it dry for a while. I'm gonna do the third one. The palette is not good for flowers, but we'll do right now. So what I'm doing is the corners. Pay attention. So I'm just doing a little bit of corners, and I'm gonna wet my brush and drag it so that there's a bleeding effect going on. So a little bit of bleeding going on, and there's a bit of a yellow. So I'll come back and darken the center as well, and I'm going to use a lavender. Very similar. Especially for the flowers, I suggest you guys use a synthetic brush. A mop, I would say, is slightly an expert level, but it goes to white, and then I will come back and then make it dark. So right now it looks like the rose is a little dry. I'm going to come in, add some that's layer 2. I'm going to come in and do another layer. So right now, let me do the marigold. Again, these are layer 2. I'm going to come back and then do a layer and I am turning the brush in a way that it looks circular, and the same thing I'm going to do with orange. It's a bit more red, doesn't matter. That's it. And the same for the hibiscus. I'm going to increase the colors on the side. And I'm going to wash it. It's a wet brush. I'm going to wash it back. And I'm going to add a little more gray. A little bit of gray. And there's a bit of yellow sitting on the top as well. All right, moving forward. So the fourth flower, the pansy, is ready. It's dry. I'm going to use, so I'm going to do that curve is important. It gives you the direction. It gives you the feel that the petal is turned on that direction. And lots of yellow. This one is mixed with a little bit of gray, but still looks convincing in my opinion. And let's go to the plumera. I think I'm going to just add a dab of yellow in the center. And a little bit of color on the side. And I would leave that right there. Let's go to tulips. The tulips are pinkish in color. Could be any color. So I'm doing okay, and I'm coming back for a little bit of stem. And I can do a little more of the other stems as well. All right, moving to jasmine. Jasmine is an interesting thing. It's quite small. What we could do is a negative. So it's got a subtle white, but you can't let it. I'm going to do it slightly greenish. And then guys, keep in mind, once it dries, the color is about 30% lower. So make sure the painting looks a little more darker, because once it dries, it looks a lot beautiful jasmine. And then there is Dahlia. So Dahlia is, I'm going to try to take a little more liquid. So every time I dip in the brush, I take a little more water from the brush in the end, but I leave the pigment. I'm going to do it's the same effect. It's a rinse and repeat. So now the pigment is there. I'm going to use a clean brush, a little more water, and I'm dragging down the paint. You're going to do a little sooner than before the paint dries, which you can see here. And that gives you some sense of Dahlia. and sunflower. Bold black and green, a little more gray. Gray. I will squeeze in a little bit of lemon yellow. If it's sunflower, let's do bright and sharp. I'm going to take a little bit of tissue paper in my hand to control the pigment, and a little more water. Nothing more to it. If it wants to bleed a little bit, let it bleed. I will come back and add a little more highlights to that. And for things which have been drying, there's another leaf. Let's add another leaf. And what is this? This is a lotus. Let's do purple lotus. A little more water than I wanted, but that's the beauty about having a little bit of tissue. That's the first coat. Let it dry, and now we come to the lily. Same technique. We do the colors from the inside, and with wet water we pull it outside. So you get that natural gradient outside, and there's a little bit of yellow, and then orange, and then we'll come back and finish that one. So the next one is some daisies. Let's do some red daisies and some yellow daisies. So I'm just going using the flute. And let's do a yellow. And let's do, why not, a purple. Let's do a red. Again, keep in mind, I'm not trying to add too many details. This is just a sketch. So I'm taking a little more water off, and I'm adding a little bit of stock, and we'll come back once it dries. We'll add a little bit of highlight. So most of the dahlias are we'll come back and then finish the colors. And next, the orchid. Orchid, why don't we do a blue orchid? We've been doing reds and yellows. Let's do a blue orchid. I'm using a dry brush. I'm using the side instead of the center to give that textured look. And let's do a purple heart. And a little bit of, it's going to melt in, blend in, and no orchid is complete without a nice clean stem. So remember, we're going to come back as and when it dries to give a nice highlights where and when it's needed. So I think it needs one more branch, and I think that's about it. And Rajnigandha. So Rajnigandha has a green stem. That's sap green and that's sugar green. Sap green, I'm going to use I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to gently blend it, and I'm going to use yellow, very subtle. And it has a lot of pigment in the center. And why don't we add a couple more stem? That's it. And the next is Zinnia. To be honest, I never knew there was a flower called Zinnia. I might have seen it, but I didn't know the name. Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of gap, a little bit of purple. Got a little too purple. And you see multiple layers. And it has yellow and a little bit of blue. I'll come back and then add a little bit of yellow to that. The next one is Carnation. So let's do Algerian red. So I'm not being any particularly, carnations are slightly organic shape, and everything they will pop back once we add a little bit of colors. Now it's got a couple of bats, and let's do green stalks and maybe a brown stem. And adding a little bit of highlights. Just to give that another dimension or another layer. Yes, I would call that's complete. And lavender. Let's see. So I'm gonna do randomly poke just to get a feel for the flower bushels, I'm guessing. I'm not really sure what it's called, but it gives you an idea. There are some flowers and also a little bit of dark. And thin green stems. Makes it look attractive. That's good. And now the next one is rosemary. I'm using a little bit of lavender. So same thing I'm going to do is color the tips and then come back and then pull that with some clean water. Color the tips, pull that back, pull that back. Maybe we can add another flower. It's just simple shapes. And rosemary has usually a dark green petals or leaves, sorry. And I'm mixing it with a little bit of yellow because the underside of the rosemary is lighter than the outside. So it gives you a little bit of two-tone. And I'll come back and then I'll finish it. All right, couple more to go. We're almost there. So the next one is a gerbera. The gerbera has a yellow ring. Sorry, I know, a brown ring. Let's do a brown ring with a little bit of, oops, that's why I have tissue in place. Super easy, not to worry. Once you do it, just take the extra pigment out. You're back to being that. And yellow, I'm going to do two-stroke motion. So I'm going to go curve, curve in, curve in, curve in, curve in, curve in, curve, 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 curve. I'm trying to make sure that I overlap the last pigment. Oh, sorry, the petal. And you want to make sure there's a little bit of blending going on over here. And almost there. The second layer. And certain highlights here and there. Just gives that there is more than one layer in the flower. Yeah, I think that should do. And the last, daffodils. A lot of yellow flowers. A lot of yellow flowers. Let's do an Indian yellow. There's very little, but there is some Indian yellow. So lighter outside. Still, I'm using lemon yellow, but the same color, Maybe I'll add a little bit of brown. And I shall wash it to give that flare effect. And looks all right. And a little bit of shadow. Maybe that's a bit too dark. No worries. You can always, being wet or having control of water is your friend. So you control. We'll add a couple more lines. That's it. All right, let's go to the final stages. Let's go to the rose. I shall add a few highlights just to give that depth. All right, always keep in mind, even though it looks like it's too dark, it's gonna wither or it's gonna dilute in color once. So a little bit of, it's got a tawny leaf. Just a suggestion. So we're not doing botany, we're just suggesting that's the case. And the next one is Marigold. So we're doing is we're adding a little more oomph to it just to give that it's got multiple layers. I must admit it's a little more trickier to do Marigold, and a little more darker here and there. It gives the illusion that there's more to the flower. The next one is the yellow, so the orange one. Same thing. I'm just adding more effect to it. And the leaves. There's a stem. That's it. And next comes is Hibiscus. So I'm using a dry brush. It's got a style or a stigma. I'm going to drop a little more, and I'm going to just increase the color on the edges. And I'll make the edge soft by using a wet brush. The last thing we want is dark edges, strong edges. We want it to be soft and subtle. And to give the shadow overlap, all right, I'm going to leave that. Just a suggestion. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. The tulips. Let's see. The tulips needs a little more color on the side. And the leaves, assuming there's one shadow, one side shadow. And let's make it pop a little bit. That's it. Jasmine has a little bit of yellow core. Yellow core. I'm using the brush to just to give a little more texture. Probably not the best, the jasmine, but for what we are trying to do as an exercise, that's fine. Dahlia has a little more darker center, so we're going to do is darker center, and then also we're trying to I will highlight the tips a little more. The colors to pop out a little more. And I would make them a little soft, and I would call it a day. Alright, let's go to sunflower. Sunflower. So the way to make it look overlapping is you come in, you do one side light and one side dark. Looks very, oh, didn't intend to do that. And a little more black dots. Again, these are not detailed drawings, these are just sketches. And the lily. So the lily, I'm going to wet the brush a little more. I'm trying to use a little more lavender. So trick is to have some sharp edges at the top and then soft edges in the bottom, and allow a little bit of green stem. Helps and make the center a little dark. That's it. All right, so the next one is the lily. So the lily has some funny stems. So less water, and thin as possible, and we are just connecting that, and in this case it has some speckled. That's it. I'm gonna make these a little more prominent. All right, next is Daisy. All right, so a little of yellow, Just a suggestion saying that there's more than 1 or 2 layers. I'm not going to touch that. Orchid for a sketch, that's fine. I'm going to just darken up the center and a little on the side. And the stem looks too flat because we need to have some sort of light source. I'm going to make the stem dark on one side. A little more shadow on this petal. Almost there. Bear with me, guys. Just 2 more. Yellow. And by the way, this is the biggest flower tutorial I've done. I usually don't do so many flowers, but I've seen videos where they do 4 or 5 flowers. I said, why not 20 flowers? Why not? And that's it. And the carnation. Not carnation, that one is Zinnia. Alright, so I'm adding shadows so that it gives you a depth. That's it. And the center has a little bit of yellow. I will call it quits. Carnation is alright. This was okay. This is okay. The Gerbera needs a little more attention. And the brown needs to be a little more brown. And last is daffodils. Iconic marks on them. And a little more to give that feathers. Make the center a little more dark so that it gives a little more focal point. There you go. 20 easy watercolor flowers for any occasion. 1 or 2 brush, a simple pencil. Let me know what you think about it. Any interest or any other painting you want me to do, I'll be happy to do. Till next time, thank you, and please don't forget to hit the subscribe and the notification button so that you get the latest watercolor tutorials by me. Till next time, good night, good morning, and good afternoon. Bye.